Today we're looking at children who are bilingual and how you can assess them for speech sound disorders, the best practice, and how you can do it for $0. I'm going to show you how you can do it for free, and I'm going to share all of the links in the show notes. The only thing that's going to cost your district money is a translator, of course, but the materials, it's all free, and I'm going to give you the 8-step process that is considered the gold standard for ASHA. Now, this came from an article from 2017, AJSLP. It's from Sharon McLeod and a group of experts internationally, and they said this is best practice. What I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to give you the 8-step process, and we're going to go through a Spanish-speaking, bilingual, English-speaking child, and what you would do with someone who's bilingual, Spanish-speaking. So the first thing we're going to look at is step 1, and that is getting a case history and looking at the language profile. What we want to know is what language is spoken in the home environment and how often. Was it 50% Spanish, 50% English spoken at home? Is it 80% Spanish, 20% English spoken at home? And what about at the school environment? Is it 80% English, 100% English spoken in the school environment? We're going to want to document that in the assessment. What languages do they speak primarily in the home? Which languages are they more fluent in? And here you really do want to do the intelligibility and context scale, in which they simply ask 7 questions to see how intelligible the child is to parents, to acquaintances, and to those unfamiliar. Now, the reason you're going to want to give the intelligibility and context scale assessment, which I'm going to give you the link for, which is also free, is that kind of gives you some numerical data, because what Sharon McLeod found in her research is that if you get a score from those 7 questions that's in the 3 range or the very low 4 range, like 4.1, or under. These are children that are likely identified by teachers and parents as having a speech sound disorder. And if you get a score that's in the mid 4 range or higher, then it's likely this is a child that is within normal limits. So it's nice to get that free assessment. And Sharon McLeod, I don't know how she did it, but she had it interpreted by different communication scientists around the world. So you can get that for free, and the link is going to be in the show notes. So you're going to see a link from the Alberta questionnaires for getting the language profile, more information about what language is spoken, where the language is spoken, how often the language is spoken, and how the child's languages have developed. And you're going to also find there that link for the intelligibility rating that the parent provides and how intelligible the child is to the people that are known to them and to strangers. And then you can get that average score from those 7 questions. And like I said before, if it's in the 3 range or lower, then you're looking at this child likely has a speech sound disorder. If you're looking at a range that is 4 and higher, it's likely that this child is within normal limits. The next thing we're going to look at is sampling both languages. When sampling both languages, we're going to want to give a single word speech sound test, and that is available for free. I have a link for that, and this is the University of British Columbia. They have a single word assessment in many different languages, so you can get a free Spanish version and use that and see how do they perform at the single word level. You're also going to want to hear how the parent would say the word, because, for instance, in Spanish, you have very different Spanish if it's Caribbean, if it's Mexican, if it's out of Spain. So you're going to want to hear how does the parent say that word as well. Whenever the child says the word, you would have the parent say the word after the child, ideally. If you don't have access to a parent, of course, a translator is going to be next, but then you can look at these variations of the language online. That's free and very easily available. So we're going to do that. We're also going to want to get a percentage consonant correct. Now, these percentage consonant correct numbers are pretty much in line with what we find in the English language. We're really looking for, if it's age 4 and above, a 90% or higher percentage correct consonant correct rating. When you go below 90% and you're into that 80% or less zone, that's when we're looking at these are children that are likely having a speech sound disorder. A lot of the researchers use frog. Where are you? A wordless picture book that they go through and the child talks about. And then, of course, you're going to want to hear the parent after the child say what the child said and repeat it back in their language so you can compare the parent's pronunciation to the child's pronunciation when you are doing your IPA transcription. The next part is the narrow IPA transcription, and that's so important because we're going to come across things like a soft D. And so what we have so far is we've covered 3 steps. The first, we're getting that case history on the child's language development and also looking at their intelligibility and context rating. In that form, both of those links will be right there in your show notes. The second step we're going to look at is sampling both languages with a single word test, both in Spanish and a single word test in English. Now here, we're going to use different assessments because we have different consonants in the 2 languages. However, when we bring out the book, Frog, Where Are You? We're going to want to hear the wordless picture book in English and also describe it in Spanish. When they describe it in Spanish, you're going to want the parent to repeat what they said afterwards and how they would say it, okay? Then you're going to step 3, do narrow transcription. So you really want those allophonic variations. It's not enough to just say, well, it's this sound. So there's many sounds in English that we don't have in Spanish. For instance, the sound is not in Spanish. We have the Z sound that's not in Spanish. We really have to do separate tests when it comes to the single word test and give an English test and give a Spanish test for the single word test and use neurotranscription. Step 4 has to do with the parent baseline recording. So you're going to audio record the child saying the Froggy book, which you can get for free. You don't have to order it from Amazon, the Wordless Picture book, and you can download the PDF and you can make up a little flip chart and you go through the book that way. You're going to do that with the parent and with the child and compare the 2. So you need that parent transcription. Once again, we don't want the translator because the translator likely speaks a different dialect of the language. We don't want to mark what the child's saying is incorrect because it's dialectal and it's not a speech sound disorder. Number 5, the independent inventory. We're going to want to look at what are all of the sounds that the child can produce in Spanish? What are all of the sounds that the child can produce in English? Then we're going to look at what are all the sounds the child should produce in Spanish. There's a nice bilinguistic Spanish-English chart, and I have the link there. And you can go right online, you can buy their PDF downloadable book for $10, or you can go ahead and take screenshots, and they're really big, beautiful charts about when the Spanish sounds develop and comparing them to the English sounds and how they differ. They're really nice charts on bilingual.com. That is also in the show notes. You're going to look at that in step 6, the independent analysis and ruling out what is a transfer error and what is not a transfer error. For instance, okay, they don't have the TH sound in the Spanish language. That's why the child cannot produce the TH. It's not necessarily from a speech sound disorder. They haven't had exposure to this sound. Okay, the child is producing the sound in this manner because that's how it's produced dialectally in Spanish. It's not a speech sound disorder. So really looking at that bilinguistics.com, the differences between the Spanish and English, you can determine whether this is a transfer error or whether this is a speech sound disorder. Step 7 is we're only going to diagnose it as a speech sound disorder if the errors occur in both languages. We see that this child is stopping. We see that this child is fronting in both of the language. We see that this child is gliding in both of the languages. When you see in these 2 languages the same phonological process, this is what we're going to want to focus on. This is something that's going to have a direct impact in both languages. So we want to look at that. That's when we have a speech sound disorder and it's not a transfer error or an error because the child is simply beginning to learn this language. Step 8, the final step of all, is to treat in the child's home language if possible. So if the child speaks Spanish, to treat in Spanish. And the research indicates that if you use complex targets, which is going to be the next episode, you're going to get generalization to English. So when we talk about complex targets, in Spanish, they don't have the 3-element S blend. Work on a 3-element S blend, even though they don't have it in Spanish, that you're not going to get generalization into Spanish. If you work on an English 3-element S blend, could that promote the generalization of an FR blend or an FL blend in Spanish? Now, I can't say to you, no, it won't transfer. And the reason I can't say that is we don't have the research. It hasn't been researched as of yet. There currently is a large NIH study that's looking at if we do English consonant clusters, will it transfer into Spanish? What I think is I think it will. And the reason I think it will is because we know from approaches such as the REST approach for childhood apraxia of speech, where they use nonsense words, you get generalization to real words. And we also know that universally speaking, when we work at 3-element clusters, we likely get generalization to 2-element clusters. For instance, with my kids that I work with the 3-element S blends on, I get the F blends for free, even though they're rhetorically very different. Now, of course, we do have 3-element S blends in the language, but because of the universals of how language development occurs, in which you get a 3-element cluster, you get the 2-element cluster for free, that's more simple. We may see, and I'm not sure if this NIH study is going to look at that if you work on 3-element S blends, you will get transfer to Spanish in the FL and FR blends. I think that's worth researching. And I must admit, that's something that I would be very interested in researching if I'm working with a child in both Spanish and English. And I say, okay, we're going to work on the 3-element S blends. And I say, okay, did we get generalization to Spanish when we worked on these 3-element S blends, even though the 3-element S blends are not in Spanish? That's something with researching. What you would do, of course, is an alternative design study in which the next semester you look at FL and FR blends. You're looking at blends that are in their language and what kind of gains do we get on untreated sounds and doing the 2-element FL and FR blends compared to the 3-element S blends into the Spanish language. You can do an alternate design in which you're alternating your treatment targets to see the impact on untreated sounds. So I think that's going to be a very interesting study that I'm going to have my eyes on. I know that we talk about this one single case study of a child that was Cantonese English speaking, and Dad did this research. This is one child where they did English targets and it didn't translate to Cantonese, but Cantonese is a much more complex language than English, where you don't really have that difference in complexity if you're comparing Spanish to English. So this is going to be an interesting study. I can't wait till the results come out on this NIH study. I'm going to have to learn more about it and see how large it is, how controlled it is. When I say controlled, it would be great if they could keep everything the same except for the treatment target. And a lot of times when you have NIH studies like this, they like to make lots of bells and whistles promises, so they manipulate many different variables. And when you do that, you're not going to be able to see how much the cluster, the target word made the difference because you're manipulating lots of different variables. For the time being, we're going to focus on this 8-step process that is considered the gold standard when it comes to assessing bilingual speakers. You could use this process on any language. I talked today about Spanish because many of us service bilingual Spanish-English speakers. You can use this process and use all of these links. Most of these links are not only in Spanish, you're going to see them in a large variety of languages that they offer. She goes big when she does something, when it's cross-linguistic. So many of these different, when you go into the Alberta questionnaires about language, you're going to see many different languages and in many different languages to find out how much the child speaks the home language, the native language, and how much the child speaks English and where they speak these different languages and when they begin speaking these different languages. So you have a nice case history. So many of these links will serve you in many different languages. There's only a couple links that are only Spanish specific. So I hope this is of great use to you, and you can come back to this episode many times in the future when you come across a bilingual child and you are doing a speech sound disorder assessment. And I hope you can do it for $0 and you can do a really gold standard job.